Cool. Well, thank you very much for having us here tonight. What my presentation is about tonight is really just a story. So hopefully you get something out of it. When I was originally thinking of things that I could present on, I thought, present on what you know, and no one knows things quite like they know their own story. So I thought it'd be interesting to tell a bit of an anecdote. So this is the Tomato documentation story, a play in 3 acts. So essentially, it was a case of going from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. So where we were like 12 months or so ago to where we are now, which is a much better place. Part of what motivates us at Tomando, as in the team that I'm in, is this quote from a software engineer at Google and a developer advocate. Everything that developer relations does needs to have a strategy to scale that doesn't require a linear growth in size. So we were really keen that as far as the documentation went, the more docs that we needed or the bigger the platform grew that we were documenting, we wouldn't necessarily need to keep adding to the size of our team, that we could empower others to contribute as well, so that we didn't have to worry about scale. So the scene of the story is Tomando. It's currently part of the larger NeoPost group, but we work pretty independently. We are mainly Brisbane based, but we do have offices in Sydney. We have some developers contributing in Cavignon in France, and also some development happening in America as well. But mainly the action is mainly in Brisbane. Our current, to market is a legacy platform, which we'll get into in a little bit. But we have a new platform in development. And with the legacy platform, we technically, we had a traditional sort of strict separation between documentation that developers generated that was technical, and sort of the end user stuff, if you like, was done by business people. There wasn't a lot of collaboration between the two. So we had this sort of thing, which wasn't too bad. It is actually Markdown based, but it's generated by developers, and the publishing method and the mechanism for that is, when I got there, was really poorly understood, even by developers. So as a result, because updating this wasn't part of their workflow, part of their definition of done, if you like, this stuff could fall out of date, even though it looks pretty modern. The business-based docs that are like the end-user docs, if you like, was more this kind of stuff. So it was written in Word. I've just got a little snapshot there, but that's a PDF that you would download. Very basic, very simple. The footer date is actually incorrect. On the front page, it says it was last updated in 2015. Just little bits and pieces like that. It wasn't a very automated or very good experience, I guess, for the end user, and that was something we were concerned about going forward. So the cast of characters is me. I came in as a lone technical writer. I was hired because the company felt that a technical writer was needed. The other two people mentioned there are part of the team that I'm a part of, which we get to in a minute. Brendan Abbott's here tonight, senior developer, and also Kwa, who couldn't be here tonight. We form a team of people who have built the platform, the documentation platform I'm going to talk about. Even though the presentation is called, from Word to Markdown, it's actually quite a bit more than that. So as you'll see as we go along. But there's been support from a lot of others at Tomando as well. So, and indeed the open source community, which I'll also get into. So when I started, that was my challenge. We needed hot docs for a new platform. It was a total greenfield, which is quite a rare opportunity. We did have legacy, but I didn't have to follow the legacy. I didn't have to fit in with the existing infrastructure. And also, I was the expert. So they're like, we hired you, do your thing, weave your technical writing magic. And the most important point is that the documentation was already late. So we did have some docs happening, technical reference material, but we didn't have any narrative. We didn't have anything to give context to that. And that was something that customers really needed for them to be able to be part of what we were trying to build. So it was really urgent. Long story short, so the first act was to put out the fire. the demand for rapid docs. So this is what I felt we needed. So I was looking for a solution for our needs. My overwhelming goal was rapidly stand up some docs, and I needed a integrated publishing system. So I didn't have any tools with me at the time that would support being able to enter the text, to have it corporate branded and themed, that I could apply common styling conventions. So the name of a web page would be italicized, and bullet points were such and such. And also I could do some iconography. So a little tip has a little tip icon and those sorts of things. And I needed to find a system real quick. So I guess my response to that was this guy. I was kind of like, this is a lot. I'd never been involved in that sort of thing before. I'd only ever worked in a very established company where it's like type the text in there and it'll come out there, and we're not making any changes to that process. So my solution, my very short-term solution, and the one we've moved away from, was Word. It was old faithful. It was I could instantly publish documentation very quickly. I had corporate branding already taken care of. Iconography was really simple. Conventions and consistency were tough. I was manually applying most of the styles. I did have a few built-in styles that I was able to apply, but it was obviously tricky. Anyone that's worked in Word for technical writing knows it can be tricky to have a consistent document all throughout. The delivery mechanism was via email, of course. That was okay for a short time. That was, here's some docs, have a look. Here's some docs, have a look. But, of course, the problem with Word is that it's a dinosaur. It's extremely unwieldy. No one can really meaningfully contribute except for me, so it didn't have that scaling aspect. I could do syntax highlighted code samples, but it was a lot of effort. I had to take code, I had to copy them into the clipboard and apply some styles to that content, and then basically get it into rich text format, and then Word would accept it with all the coloring and all that sort of stuff. So it was just nasty. And it only works if the project stays small and I'm the only writer and I can manage everything. And that just is not the case. So moving on from there, Act 2 is, now that we've got something for people, what can we do going forward? What can be the long-term strategy? So the first thing was, now that I'd bought myself some time, is to go shopping. There's a lot of documentation platforms out there, and if anyone's ever had to evaluate them, there's a dizzying array. Some of them promise like one click, like just point your Markdown file at this web server and voila, it's all done for you. It looks beautiful out of the box. Some require a little bit more effort. I talk about development effort, but really by that I mean you might have to set up some build system or something. All of them are better. All of them are better than Word, though, but they all have various strengths and weaknesses. So initially, that was my strategy: was I'm going to find something for our external docs. It's going to be great. It'll look great, but it wasn't a holistic approach for the whole company. So it solves my immediate problem, and it didn't require a lot of external input. I was empowered as the expert to make a selection for a docs publishing system and to get content in there and out to people. So it looked okay, but I began to realize that I was going to need some buy-in from developers. I was going to need some of the content that we were going to want to host. Maybe we do want to host release notes. Maybe we do want to host change logs, those sorts of things. That is going to require interaction with developers. And if I begin to insert myself into the development process, that could require some quite large changes to development methodology. And a lot of these systems did require some development effort. So it's possibly more than I could have handled alone. So thankfully, I had a lot of chats with Brendan over lunch from time to time. Him and I would talk about, what if this would be great? How about if only we could? And then we had an epiphany. So I was trying to solve a problem for customers, but we also had an internal problem where we had a lot of disparate documentation that was going out all over the place internally for our internal projects. It was hard to find, it was spotty, there was no one place where all that could go. But there was a lot of work being done internally, or a lot of thinking being done internally about how can we create an internal docs resource as well. So essentially we decided to join forces. Brendan really drove it, which was great, and said he needed me for that process to have like a unified system that looked after internal and external. And so thus, developer experience was born. So you guys might already have a developer experience team or a customer relations team. You may have a lot of that stuff already, but for a company like Tamando, we'd never really had that before. So the three of us came together to form a team, and initially we would build a system that would be able to host a lot of our internal docs and become like an internal docs repository. And then that same system could be applied to the problem of an external docs repository. We also have other responsibilities as well. We actually handle internal developer happiness. So something that we do that doesn't relate to Docos is we hold a developer survey, internal developer survey, every 3 months to gauge how everyone's going and just do bits and pieces like that. And we also have a remit to handle external developer interactions as well. So yeah, that's us. So the third act, the system. I'm not going to give any examples or demos tonight. At some point down the track, I'd like to. Yeah, would have been pretty exciting. But I'm going to talk about some of the principles that guide it. There might be a follow-up presentation at some point with some more examples. But for someone like who I was, like a lone writer, a lot of the things that I've learned over the last 12 months, and that we as a team have learned over the last 12 months, have been invaluable. And I just imagine that maybe there are other writers out there, probably not at Red Hat, because Red Hat's pretty sorted with docs, but there might be some other writers out there that are using Word, and like this is something that could, this is something that a lot of these principles that I'll talk about tonight are something that could help them to think about things and to like maybe go to their businesses and be like, this is what we need to do as well. So we'll have a bit of a look at it. So there's a lot of things we could have done, but these are the principles that we decided that were important. So we wanted to reuse as much of our infrastructure as possible. If we didn't have to get anything off the shelf, or we didn't have to buy anything particularly, we wouldn't. We're already paying enough money for the infrastructure we're investing in, so let's reuse it. The contribution had to be frictionless. So one of the problems I had at my old company was that we used a technical authoring tool. We used AuthorIt, and to get developers to contribute into that was quite difficult. We wanted contribution to be almost, or basically as easy as contributing code. And so that relates to the third point. The documentation had to live as close to the source of truth as possible. So where possible, documentation lives with the code. It doesn't live in another area away from the code. They're right next to each other. We wanted, internally at least, the docs to be written by developers for developers. So one of our company principles is to pay it forward. And so we wanted developers to pay forward to other developers. Do some development, even if it's just an internal tool, document it well, make that available so the next guy comes along and has a good time using it. That's our aim. So applying those principles to what we're doing at Tamando now, all of our documentation is in Markdown. So we had, internally, we were already doing READMEs, contributing Markdown guides, sort of the standard GitLab format of a project, or standard Git project, I guess. It is all stored in our GitLab instance. So all of our documentation is in GitLab. None of our documentation, even for external people, is outside of GitLab. The review mechanism is the same. So for internal, external docs, any docs, whether it's just a README in a project or whether it's specifically handwritten documentation, it's all the same review mechanism that the developers were already familiar with code. So we maintained the predominant documentation format, location, and review mechanism. And yeah, I do my docs in Sublime Text or Visual Studio Code. You can use whatever you like because that's the beauty of Markdown, right? Doesn't rely on Windows, for example. You can use anything you like. We reused our ecosystem, so we were investing in NPM, Node, and AWS. So we are using those for our docs as well, and we've grabbed some NPM packages that actually do a little bit of documentation linting on grammar, on spelling, on Markdown formatting as well. So it's really good. It catches. I catch my own spelling errors all the time. So that's really good. So it kind of gates the docs. It all gets tied together using the same CI/CD pipelines that we put code together with. So all the documentation can be pulled from all the projects, all the disparate projects, and can be combined together in like a guide based around themes. So we could take 5, 10, 15, 20, or 100 different readmes and things like that and bring them all together into a combined whole. And it's one place you can go for all of that documentation. And it's presented well and in a nice format. And it's all related to other stuff. Like it all looks like one book, even though it's come from all these different places. But you don't have to have knowledge of all those other projects to contribute. You just contribute your bit and it all gets pulled in together. We also combine some of those project docs with some curated material. So we handwrite some documentation that tells the story of how all these things tie together. And, so otherwise you sort of get landed in amongst 50 different project docs all in one place and be like, I don't know where to start, or yeah. So we do write some curated material as well. And yeah, we lint Markdown for spelling, formatting, and grammar. And also broken links too, actually. We have a broken link checker for our external docs. So that's good. It's caught me a few times. We generate all of our content into static HTML, and we host it in a static HTML host. And we use Amazon S3, but we could use any static HTML hosting website. There's no like tie back to a backend or anything like that. It's all, everything you need is there. The benefit is that it's an easy sell. If you tell people that to contribute to documentation, they don't need to do much very different. They're like, yep, sign me up. You don't have to really train anyone. If I said to someone, just use a normal Git workflow, that's literally all the training that's required to contribute docs. It scales really well, particularly for internal docs, which really should be written by the devs. Hire more devs, get more doco. It doesn't all have to come through one person or come through me. And literally the internal documentation library builds itself. So we have people doing docs, contributing docs, and consuming docs we don't even know about. Even though we're the team that kind of looks after the system, we don't know all the docs that are out there. And that's really what we want. That scales. We do have some external docs that we carefully author. So it's all comes through, like a bit more of a centralized point, and it's, carefully reviewed and carefully edited, if you like. But it all uses the same technologies, all the same stuff. If you're familiar with our internal system, you become familiar with our external system as a result. And all of the components in this, all of the steps in the system are decoupled. So we can take out, at the moment we use MkDocs for static HTML generation. We just take that out and drop a new one in. If we want to host somewhere else, we take that out and drop a new one in. So it's all been designed to allow us to change things up as much as we want. And yeah, you get to git commit all the docs. There are some drawbacks. However. The barrier to authoring for non-developers is quite high. Luckily, we haven't had any non-devs, and I consider myself a dev. We haven't had any non-devs try and contribute yet. So this is a system that you do need to have a certain level of knowledge to get benefit from or to be able to contribute to. To get the publishing system happening for yourself, to have like a local copy that you can preview, it takes a little bit of work. So that could be a blocker for some people if they have to spend time setting up a publishing pipeline for themselves and things like that. It's not a case of just add content, submit, add content, submit, until you get it all set up. And the tooling that we've used, a lot of it is internal and it required significant development effort. So to suit our particular needs in our specific use case, we wrote our own tooling, and so that I could not have done alone. And so for a lone technical writer out there, they would probably struggle to put together this themselves. But I still think some of the principles would still be worthwhile. You would just need to find a system and tooling that didn't require development effort, and maybe it wasn't quite as ambitious to pull all the projects together. And so I guess the takeaways for anyone that was like I was 12 months ago is that if you find yourself in a position where you're the only person having to do a thing, don't stay that way. Don't let yourself be the only guy. You've got to find people to be with and around that can help you, that you can bounce ideas off of, and that can also help you do what you need to do and fulfill your goals. If you were, I guess in some companies there is quite a clear delineation between technical writers and developers, but if you are in a very small company, or you are in a very small, you're the only technical writer, I would highly recommend getting involved in development. The development process, get to know the devs really well, become one of them almost, become like their friend, because you're going to need their help. And you also need to understand the problems they're trying to solve. Sometimes developers find themselves writing docs, hopefully all the time, but for anyone who would be in this audience or listening to this presentation, if they're a non-writing developer, so they're a developer first and only write docs when they have to, I would encourage them to get better at writing docs, find a way to get better. The world needs the docs from developers. Sometimes you're the only one that's ever going to write them. Get help with it. So writers can get better at development stuff from developers, and developers can get better at writing stuff from writers. So I think I see like a world where it can all be very symbiotic and we can all be supporting each other. And obviously, use open source as much as you can. We have incorporated a few open source projects into what we're doing, but we've always tried to contribute back. So I'm pretty sure almost every tool we've used, we have at least contributed merge requests back to, and many of them have been accepted. So we're doing our bit as well. We're not the full open source package yet, but we're definitely contributing, giving and taking. I was just going to finish with some of the resources, some of the things that we use that could be dropped into many a publishing pipeline, particularly linting, spelling, and grammar checking for Markdown. Those things can be run locally on anyone's machine. They don't have to be made part of a publishing pipeline if that wasn't suitable. But I think anyone writing Markdown-based docs would benefit from running some of these tools over their stuff. A lot of these tools have like rules that you can include or exclude, so you can decide, oh well, at business X, we format our Markdown this way. We have, so there's some of the tools we use. Pretty quick presentation. Were there any questions?
Is Markdown lint used for broken links?
No, Markdown lint is more for example, that you start with a level 1 heading at the top, that you don't have consecutive blank lines. It's very much like a code linter in that respect, that your numbered lists are all prefixed with 1.1.1. instead of 1.2.3.4, because you let the renderer handle making those numbers. Yeah, exactly. So it's little things like that. I didn't actually put the link up for the broken link checker, but I think it's literally called broken link checker. BLC, yeah. And so after we've actually published our docs out, we'll actually have it go and check the published version and run through all the links and to make sure that everything links up. And anytime there's a broken link, it's because I've made a mistake I haven't caught. So, were there any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Do you use Visual Studio Code in writing docs because that's what devs use, or?
I have a preference for a really clean system that, because most of our docs live in code projects. Some of them live in like doc-only projects, but it's all kind of GitLab-y. Visual Studio Code is kind of like designed around opening a project like that. You could literally use any Markdown text editor that you liked. Early on in the piece, when I started writing Markdown, I was using a few Markdown specific editors, but then I found, with a few plugins, like Markdown based plugins for Visual Studio Code, for example, you get a lot of like previewing and in editor linting and stuff like that, and in editor spelling and stuff like that. So because a lot of these development tools have like native support or very easy to add support for Markdown specifically, that's why I do it that way. And it also means if I was making some code changes, which I do from time to time, and usually there'll be doco changes related, it's all just happening all in the one place.
Sure.
Yeah.
Use Komodo, I think, has all those features.
Right, okay, yeah. Yeah.
So how frequent do you publish to external docs, and is that automated as well?
Yeah, so publishing takes place anytime you merge to master. So merging to master kicks off a build. We also, just to make sure, that doesn't happen in every case. It depends on the type of project. If something is deeply nested, it might not kick off a project build. So we actually have a schedule where we'll at least once a day build everything, so that we know that everything's reasonably current. But generally, if things aren't too deeply nested, the merging, so you have a review and then it gets accepted into master, and then that kicks off a build, and then you can just walk away and it's out there. Yeah, I'd give you more examples. All of our external docs are kind of like pre-release, internal only, all wrapped up in an early access program type thing. I can't really show anything, but hopefully eventually I'll be able to show you guys through the whole thing. Yeah.
Two questions. One is, are there any plans to like open source this toolchain, or like a spec for it, or like I mean it? Sorry.
No, we absolutely do. A couple of our tools that we use right now are very close to being open sourceable, like in that they solve a problem generic enough that anyone could get benefit. Some of our tools are a little bit bespoke, a little bit like too much us, but with not too much effort. They could be open sourced. We do have an open source project or group, if you like, on GitHub, where we've put a little bit of our tooling already. Like, it's not related to this tool chain, but there is some stuff up there. Tomando is on GitHub, if you like, and anyone can have a look at the stuff we've got there. And one day it'd be great for us to have at least a few of those pieces. That's what we'd like to do. Yeah, it will happen. Brendan, the developer experience lead, says it will happen, so it'll happen.
Second question, what does your company actually do? Like, what's the actual product?
We have a shipping fulfillment platform. Both of our platforms, our legacy platform and also the one we're working on right now, helps companies move things through carriers from A to B. Our current platform.
I think we may have gotten a couple of packages via.
You may have, yeah. So some of our customers use us to generate, rather than them having their own integrations with carriers, they'll integrate through us, and they'll have access to multiple carriers. So that's how it is, yeah. So we're in the shipping fulfillment industry, if you like. We don't actually ship things, no.
Tracking software.
We're the glue between carriers and merchants, if you like, yeah. Exactly.
Cool.
Any other questions? All right, I'll leave it there.